Welcome again to the closing meeting. I'm Frank, your auditor, and it has been a pleasure working with you. On behalf of the registrar, I thank you for your cooperation and the good guide work by Miriam and Carol. I also have to remind you that everything that happens here is confidential and between you and the registrar. I've decided to issue three major findings today. The first is in the area of product release. Clause 8.6 of the standard requires the organization, namely you, to implement planned arrangements at appropriate stages in the process to verify that the product requirements have been met. My finding is that there is a systemic breakdown in this process. In your receiving department, there is no evidence of operator training in either receiving or hazmat. There was hazmat received in the plant despite being not properly labeled. There is no SDS in the system as required by your process. There was evidence of unapproved parts being sent to the customers with no objective evidence of concession. And in your bottling area, there is product being packaged before it meets the specification testing. I find that product is being released without verification, creating a high likelihood of unsafe or unapproved material reaching customers. The second major finding is in the area of infrastructure. Clause 7.1.3 of the standard requires you to provide and maintain the infrastructure necessary for the operation of its processes and to achieve conformity of products and services. My finding is that there is a systemic breakdown in this process. There are alarms in this plant that say maintenance needed, but no evidence of follow-up. There are multiple digital readouts in this plant that are not functional. Preventive maintenance is not being documented, and the CMMC system requiring a maintenance procedure is not being used as required. A production scale was found out of calibration by a factor of 10. The calibration weight is not traceable to NIST, and calibrated equipment is not identified for calibration status. Also, you have a forklift inspection program that is not being properly followed. My finding is that there is a significant likelihood of non-conforming product being produced because of lack of control of this process. My last finding is in the area of non-conforming product. Clause 8.7 of the standard requires you, the organization, to ensure that outputs that do not conform to requirements be controlled to prevent their unintended use or delivery. My finding is that there is a systemic breakdown in this process. Flammable materials are present in this plant without identification or necessary documentation. There are items in the MDR cage that are dispositioned but not removed, contrary to your own operating procedure. There are multiple items in this cage that do not have the required identification. There are unapproved parts in this cage, some of which were released without concession. There is damaged material in inventory without segregation as required in your own MDR procedure, and personnel lack training on counterfeit parts and the RMA process. Based on all of this, I find significant risk that non-conforming product will reach the customers. I also have a few observations. The internal audit and corrective action processes here meet the documentation requirements, but there is a failure to use these tools to solve underlying problems in the plant and improve the quality system. There is no evidence of risk assessment or change control functions, despite the addition of an entirely new process that you don't have experience with. Process fallout objectives are not meeting their expectations without resulting corrective actions or other improvement activities. A cybersecurity event occurred without the notification of the custom. I also judge that because your production equipment lacks sufficient controls, you're not able to provide evidence that your scope of supply can include your bottling operation. Therefore, your website is not in conformity with the registrar's requirements. These are my findings. Anything an auditor says can be appealed to the technical committee at the registrar. At the end of the day, it is up to me and you to ensure the integrity of the system. My recommendation will be to recommend recertification. However, I will require a follow-up audit within 90 days to ensure that you've taken sufficient corrective action on these items. It is possible that the technical committee will decide to deny your registration and will inform you of that after they review my audit documentation. If there are no further questions, I'll be on my way. Thanks for working with me. Goodbye for now.